Hello, and thank you for joining me again. I don't know whether to introduce today as Advancing Spark or more of the Synapse Purview thing, because actually we're doing a little bit of both. What I'm doing today is taking Databricks and taking a Python notebook and seeing what I can do to call the Purview API, essentially the ApacheAtlas API, and see if that works. See if I can actually get the two to talk to each other. Absolute tons of disclaimers today. I'm using some open source libraries. They are not full final Microsoft libraries. It's using Purview, which is in preview at the moment, so it's liable to change. And I have hacked this code together really quickly to see if it's possible. This is very much not a recommended. This is this bit of code that you implement. So disclaimers, all of the disclaimers. Please don't copy this code and put it into production. None of this is prod yet. Okay, cool. Right. With that said, let's have a look. So, as usual, don't forget to like and subscribe if this is your first time on the channel. And as always, if there's anything else you want to look at, any comments, any different approaches, any different ways of doing things, let us know down in the comments. And let's get to it. So, first things first, let's go and have a look at the thing we're talking about. So, we've seen a little bit of Purview. This is my Purview preview. And what are we actually trying to do? So if I go and grab one of the things I've looked at previously, which is just a quick product CSV, the thing I am interested in is this lineage. So I can go into lineage and I can say, where did this come from? And in this case, it came from a database. So I've got a little thing saying, from a database, run a data factory copy activity and land it as a CSV in my lake. So that whole thing, don't quite know what's going on with there. So this whole lineage is scraped automatically by Data Factory. And we looked at that in the last video. So we don't have to do anything there. It will automatically go. It'll read the operational logs of Data Factory. It'll parse that. It'll go, what did I do here? Oh, it actually took that over to there. And I get lots of information. And I can do nice things like look at lineage and look at what columns went across and all of that kind of stuff. Cool. But what about when I'm looking at something else? So, I mean, that CSV, I actually ran a little Databricks notebook and then put it into something else. So that lineage is not the end of the lineage for that particular asset. So the thing I'm interested in doing is saying, if I've got customers, and then I've got a load of stuff in here. So I've got some Parquet, and I've got some raw files. I've got various different things going on in here. So how do I actually take something which is a Sparky thing and turn it into other things? And it just still makes me sad that it thinks it's Spark partitions. So this thing in particular is a place in my lake that is a customer folder. It's got a load of Parquet in there. And so it went from that CSV that landed into a Databricks notebook and then landed it as some Parquet. And I want to try and understand that, what happened there. So that's the main thing. So underneath this folder, so I've got my folder, I've got Spark partitions, it's seen some stuff is happening, and I want to be able to build out the lineage and go, what's happened here? Essentially, I want to build this thing. So this little notebook processing is something I've made. This is not something that Purview has automatically scanned. It's not something that it's gone and figured out and gone, hey, look, someone ran a Databricks process there. I have manually told Purview, either way, I picked that thing up and I put that thing over there. And there's loads we can do with that in Purview because it is based on ApacheAtlas. It has an open API. And so we can create manual types. We can register manual things. We can create our own entities. We can create all the schema beneath an entity. We can push lineage between entities. We can do loads of stuff like that. So that's the thing I'm looking at today. How do we actually tell the Purview API, by the way, you got this thing, you got this thing, there was a link that made one turn into the other. That's what we're trying to achieve. How do we do it? So when I was speaking about lineage in the last video, I got loads of comments from a whole range of different people saying, just use this API, or there's that library. Why don't you use that library? Turns out there's a load of libraries already existing for working with the ApacheAtlas API because it's open source and it's been around for a while. Now, some of them have already got Purview integration and can use things like service principal integration, all that kind of stuff. Some of them are just pure boilerplate vanilla Atlas APIs, and there is also ones in the works. So what did I do? I went over to PyPy, the home, the internet repository for all things Python libraries. It's like, you know what, just is there anything Purview aligned? And I saw some interesting things. I mean, given it's what, February the 4th? And when I looked, this is literally just been posted. So there is the Azure Management Purview library for Python, released, I believe, by Microsoft official. So essentially, there's a new proper library coming. Now, that doesn't have a lot in there currently, and it is almost entirely undocumented. So I was like, I'm not really going to go into there yet, but that's why I keep saying, take everything we're looking at today with a pinch of salt. Because what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab one of the existing libraries that's used out in the community. It's got a load of stuff baked in already for Purview. It's quite easy to get started in using it. But it kind of looks like it's going to be replaced by an official Microsoft one, or not even replaced, maybe kind of alongside. There's going to be other options as Purview matures. So take everything with a pinch of salt. This is fairly early to be looking at the API and deciding how we want to do stuff. It's all about what is possible. Cool. All right, so we're not using it. Ignore that for now. And then we've got a few things. We've got CLI. So if you're looking at using a command line interface and want to do things just locally and push things out, you can do that. This is the one I've been looking at. The PyApacheAtlas 4.0 or 0.4.0. Although I keep thinking it says Apache, but it's fine. Cool. So this one is there. It's got loads of stuff. It tells you all the different things it can do. And lots of those is like, it can do things. One, yes, you can authenticate properly with a service principal. And that's very important. You know, just to make sure we have a secure way of getting into this. This is our whole governance entity. It needs to be well governed. Being able to properly authenticate is a big one. And then our friend up here, create a custom lineage between two existing entities. It's like, yes, that is exactly what I'm trying to do. Let's do that. So I grabbed that. It has a whole GitHub page. There's a load of stuff in here. So everything I'm doing is based on what I could find in here. So it's got how you authenticate. We'll have a look at that. Got ways of actually creating custom entities, little snippets of code, super useful. And there's a huge amount of this that's based on how do you bulk import things through Excel. And I've kind of ignored that because I don't want to bulk manually import things via Excel, basically. What I'm aiming to do is I want to wrap as much of this as possible into my Spark processes so that I never have to think about it again. That's my plan. Cool. Okay, so based on that, I had a whole dig around and I found lots and lots of different things, loads of things in samples. Certainly these two, super useful. So one to go through and create just a whole load of custom entities. So if you want to say, well, actually, this thing that's in Purview that says it's a, what does it think it is? It thought it was like, well, that's a path, but it's not a path. It's a data frame that's a collection of folders, and I don't want it to be a resource set. If you want to define your own custom terms, it's not a table, it's a data frame. It's not a data frame, it's columns belonging to a Hive table, whatever it is that you are wanting to create. You can do that via these kind of, what are my new types of entity. You can create different relationship types. So actually this is the relationship, this default one out of the box is saying this is the relationship between my custom table entity, my custom column entity, and there has to be a relationship between it so it knows how that works. So you can build a load of stuff in there. I mean, essentially Apache Atlas is just a giant graph database. So you're saying there's a type of node, another type of node, and a type of edge between it. And that's what this is essentially doing, allowing us to create these different types. So loads of stuff in there. Doesn't really help us with the things I was doing. So we'll come back to that. I definitely like there's some things in there for automatically registering a data frame as an entity. I've not gone into that today. So definitely in future, looking at some of this stuff just to say, if I can just pass it a data frame and have it automatically register that data frame and all the columns in there as the relevant entity inside Purview, great. My suspicion is that a lot of this stuff's coming kind of out of the box. I don't know. I'd love to know. But I'm hoping we don't have to do this kind of thing just forever. We'll see. At least this is a really good starting point. So grabbed a load of stuff from there, and I dove into Databricks. So first things first, we need to use that snippet of connection code. So that was right from the top of that samples page from the README. You need a text ID, client secret. normal way of connecting to a service principal. So it needs a service principal application ID. It needs a certificate, live, current, secret for that service principal. And it needs to know your AD directory ID. So plugging all those three into this service principal authentication class, we can then spin up a new client. Now that client class has a ton of stuff associated to it. So when we spin that up, we'll be able to go and have a look. And then it needs the name of my catalog. So in Purview, advancing catalog is the name of my thing. So if we go to home, we can see advancing catalog is what I've called it because everything's advancing. It's what we do, branding. And we can go from there. So if I just do that, it goes off and adds it. Now, obviously, that service principal has to have the relevant access to your entire Purview account. And it took quite a few back and forths for me to make sure that account had the right permissions. And then it turned out my secret had expired. So maybe it wasn't that hard. Maybe I just made it hard for myself. But still, you need to make sure your service principal has the right permissions and roles in order to access that API. I don't know off the top of my head which was the right one. I just gave it some different admin access. So we'll boil that down as the API matures. And then you can start doing a few things. So, client dot, look at what we've got. And we've got a load of things that we can do. So we can get all my definitions, get a certain entity, get some information back. So we look at get entity header. That's a nice, easy one to start with. And then we can pass it a GUID, an ID. I don't know what my ID is. For now, easiest way to do things, if we just go and find an entity. So in this case, I was looking at my customer, wasn't I? So I can go and find something. Let's just take that one, an existing thing. And up here in my URL, I have a GUID. So I have a unique identifier for that particular entity. So you can scrape it from there. I think you can find it somewhere in the settings for it. And there's plenty of search type things as well. But just as my first check, can I get that back and understand what it is? So it knows it's a type of Azure Data Lake Gen 2 path, which is kind of interesting because if you look at it, yes, it knows it is that Azure Data Lake Storage Gen 2 folder. That's the entity type, nice descriptive name. But actually, if I'm talking about anything in the API, I need to know what that type def, what the actual name, what the code is for that type. So an Azure Data Lake Gen 2 path. I've got the owner, I've got the full qualified name. That becomes quite important. That is the unique name for this particular entity. And then what the friendly name of it is. So when I'm in here, I can understand, so this is called customer, which label it as customer. Actually, what is it really? It is the unique pathway in my lake, which is that particular folder. And you can start having a play around those things. I would advise just, if you get that all set up and working, just go have a look at all the different things you could do in there and you start to understand things. You can do that kind of get all type definitions. Gives you just a big old list of, here's all those different, what is that type called? Here's my master list of all the different types I've got registered or paged out, so I can go and have a search through that and say, what are these things? I've got file action, I've got things, a blob delete retention policy. There's a whole load of detail that is in there. Okay, and then this is that thing, so where the little sample I flicked up, this kind of thing in the samples, you've got your Databricks one. I just had to go at getting that working. And that just goes through and creates a load of sample, creates a load of Spark types for you. So if you don't have a type existing, you're like, how do I create a new type that describes this different type of file? That's a really good one just to kind of just grab some sample code. So I'm going to, you can grab, I want to create a new entity type, and then you can just go, that's what it should be called. This is the settings it needs. This is the type it is. You can go nuts and play around with that. So that was the basic, how do I connect and get working? Oh, actually, if you try and run this, it's not going to work because you need to have imported that to cluster. Sorry, I forgot to tell you that. So on my cluster, on this cluster that is currently up and running, I do have a library associated. So I need to make sure I install new, go from PyPy, and then I've got that PyApacheAtlas. So you need to have ran that on your cluster, wait for it to install before any of this is going to work. Big important thing. Probably should have said that at the start. But, if you've been skipping around a video, you probably missed it. But, that's what you get for skipping. Cool. So we've got that. So we've done that connection. We've established a connection to Purview. We've got our library installed, and we've got a few things at our fingertips that we can start playing with. How do we create that lineage? So I can get an entity by putting that GUID in, and say, just give me a definition for that entity, and I can get the other entity on the other side, and then it's just creating that link I need to do. So let's have a look at some things I can do. So one thing, just that get entity. We use get entity header, which gives us kind of that top level entity references. If we want the whole registration for that entity, we can do that same thing, and that's just putting a straight GUID in there. Okay, did that a few times. So I was having to play around saying, well, actually, if I get my starting entity, which again is kind of a path in the lake, it's going and getting a load of stuff, it's got a particular folder structure, and again, that is the qualified name. And this is one of the ones that's come through as Spark partitions. So Purview realized there's a whole set of files that went together, and collectively they're a data set. Each individual file is not a data set in its own. The collection of those files is a data set. That's good that it's recognized that. Annoys the hell out of me that it calls it Spark partitions rather than inferring that the name is customer. But that's fine. And it's got a type. So I could put the GUID in, or I can give it a combination of the qualified name and the type name, and it returns that as an entity. So let's just run that as I'm going down. So I'm going to run my auth. Going to think about it for a second. And then I'm going to run this to bring back the entity. And then when we've got that, got to do a quick readout of what the entity looks like. So I've got that on one side, and I've got entity 2 on the other side. So I'm bringing back just 2 references. Just give me a pointer and all the information I need to talk to entity 1, give me a pointer and all the information I need to talk to entity 2, and I'm just getting those 2 tied together. It's going to take a little while to start up. That's fine, it can do its thing. Okay, and then I need to do this lineage. I need to create a lineage record saying that thing is related to that thing. So we need a few things. One, I need to know what to call it. It needs a name. In this case, call it its notebook, Purview, create lineage. That's what I'm calling this process that has attached these 2 things together. Needs type. So this process type, calling it process. Essentially that is saying, what's the type of entity that's being created? So it's that it has to be an existing process type. So again, we can register new process types. So via the other code we're looking at, I can say, well, I can register a Databricks Notebook as a process type, and then I can call that in. I haven't done that currently, so I'm just calling a generic process as my link. Then I can say, well, there's a new object, which is of type Atlas process, and that expects certain things inside there. What's the name of this process? Notebook processing. The type that I'm passing in, which is coming from that one. It's the qualified name. Again, that's that full description of that process. And then it needs 2 arrays. So it needs the first entity and the second entity. So what are all the inputs going into this process? And then what are all the outputs going out? And that can be multiple. So I could have lots of different entities all lined up that I can go and talk about. Now, I'm having to do something a little bit funny. Now, again, this is fairly scrappy code as I'm getting to grips with the API. If we have a look at what that returned, now that it's actually ran. So entity 1 it's an array of referred entities. So despite the fact I gave it just a pointer to one single entity, it's just brought back a single object. It's wrapped that inside an array. So actually, in order to go and talk about certain attributes of that array, if you want the qualified name, we want the schema, we want the partition type, all of that kind of stuff, we have to go inside this entities array. Which is why I was kind of doing that, I want to say, okay, inside entities, we can kind of narrow it down in the JSON, then I can go to first reference, the first entity that's brought back, even though there's only one. And then I can start actually saying, well, actually, I want the name. That's not a thing. Okay, well, I can get something else from there. Inside here, I've got type name. Should have name. Weird. Oh, no, that's inside attributes. Okay, fine. But essentially, you get what I mean. It is a fully nested JSON object that we can go down and down and down and explore parts of it, which is, useful. Certainly kind of that array is expecting the kind of top level GUID style things. We want to be able to inspect each entity object as that. Now, I'm pretty sure when we're inside an entity, we've got loads of functions we can do. I can bring it back as items or keys. There's something I could do in there to actually surface that as a single array rather than manually traversing that JSON array. Again, I've not looked into too much detail yet, just trying to get this first prototype working. So based on that, all I'm doing is for my first entity, I'm saying just take my list of entities and bring back the first one, my zero-based array. And then of the second one, again, dig down to entities and bring back the first one. Again, probably better things I can do, but those inputs are looking for entity objects. It's looking for a minimum amount of information, which is the qualified name, the type definition, the GUID, that kind of those high-level, top-level entity definitions. So by passing it that full entity object, it has everything it needs. So I'm passing it inputs in, start entity, inputs out, end entity, and then a GUID. So it needs a unique identifier for this given process. Now I've kind of just been a bit naughty and just hard-coded the GUID. There are some functions baked into the API to be able to generate the next GUID in the list. Bring me back a GUID I've not used yet. For now, I'm kind of just going, take on. Just take a hard-coded one. Not very good, but it's fine. And then from that, so we need to take that entity definition. Again, like everything in Atlas, this is just another node with edges. So it's saying, well, I've got two nodes with my start and end entity. I want to create a new node with edges going either way according to this particular process. So I'm then uploading that as an entity. Now that batch can take a whole lot of things. I could be uploading some new entities and then the relationship between them and then some looks of lineage things. I can actually just push out a load of stuff all in that one single batch. That's just a commit this stuff, save my changes, push all these things up to Purview. So I push that and then you get a record back. So that's what I was using here. And that going through, that ran, and that was why I had underneath my given GUID, I'm not even sure if that's the right one. So if I go back to customer, let's have a look at my search results. And which one we were using? We were using advancing, sample. I think it was that one. If I look at the related things, customer CSV, and then is that the one I've got my things under? Yeah, notebook processing. So that notebook processing is created entirely manually by this process. So that whole bit of code, the object, this new lineage object that we created, is this link. They're saying this existing entity, tie them together. That's what we just created through code, which is kind of cool. And I can go in and that is an entity in its own right. So we can actually edit that and give it glossary terms and say, well, this is the person who's associated with it. We can edit it and go and actually change some information about this. We can describe it. And if we can describe it here, that means our process actually pushing that information up can also pass those details. So we can actually, to take this to the next stage, we can make actually the name of this thing that we're processing, make it the name of my Databricks Notebook automatically. Add in a description as little snippets of the code. I can include the output of my run assets that I associate to my given process. There's a lot of stuff that we can push that direction. Now, again, I'm not going too far down that path because I'm kind of hoping someone's going to do it for me, either through the alternative, the Microsoft published management API that's coming, or whether through deeper integrations with Databricks and the Purview guys to actually produce some of these things. I don't want to have to manually build a whole ton of functions to do this stuff, but you can. So taking that to kind of the next stage, you just take everything we've done there and just wrap it as a quick Python function inside your Databricks Notebook. So all that kind of instantiating the thing, registering, doing the security connection, grabbing two different entities based on their GUIDs, and then registering that particular thing. Again, you'd need to fix that so it's actually defining a new GUID each time. But you could actually wrap that in a function so it says, take a one GUID, take a second GUID, take the name of the thing that does it, and it'll run that same bit of code. So you could wrap that inside your notebooks. So at the end of every notebook that you've got, any kind of Databricks processing thing, you then say, this GUID to that GUID, that's the name, push it out there. Lots of things you can do with that, loads of potential. And I'm hesitant to do anything further than just prove out what you can do with it. I want to check the art of the possible. Is it possible to create manual lineage using the ApacheAtlas API? Yes, 100% we can do that. Should you? I absolutely fully expect that once Purview is out and live, and when they're doing the demonstration videos, I think as I mentioned last time, when they're looking like something showing off Purview and all the kind of the Microsoft published videos, you've got things like Hive as something you can go and scan. So I don't want to be creating my Hive tables manually by writing a load of code to do it. I just want it to be picking up going, oh, someone's registered a new table in Hive, and just suck that in and automatically register that with Purview. So certainly there's elements that we can do, but I don't want to. I want that done automatically by this whole governance tool. That's the whole point of that governance tool. Things like when you get down to notebook lineage, is it going to understand and be able to actually scan through my code and get to the point when it can read that and go, well, that data frame was talking over that particular folder and it wrote to that folder and, oh, they already exist as entities in my... I'd be very surprised if they get to that level. So what I'm expecting is a load of stuff about, as soon as I register something with Hive, that's going to automatically appear as an entity. And then I can have a tiny little function that says, grab the entity associated to this Hive table, grab the entity associated to this Hive table, add a lineage process with this Databricks Notebook name. And again, kind of like we did the starter off there, wrapping that in a single function and make it easy. That's the point. I don't want to have like every single person who starts using Databricks has to reinvent the wheel and have this big script and load of custom functions that they need to call. I'm hoping it's just going to be a library, or even baked into the Databricks runtime would be perfect, just to go, add lineage, this entity, push it out there. But at least if you're trying to get ahead of things, you want to start doing it now, well, one, Purview is still in preview, and two, while there's still lots of different approaches, lots of different APIs, and no real settled, this is the API to use going forward. You can do that. Those are the ways you can do it. I'll drop the links down in the description so you can at least have a bit of a play and go and explore. And I know everybody is going to comment going, can I have the code? And no, I don't think so. Mainly, not because I'm trying to hoard away my code and keep it and sit on it like a giant code dragon. Mainly, I don't want people using it in anger, because the way I've accessed the GUIDs isn't great. The way I've actually pulled out attributes from the entities isn't great. This is very much let's just have a bit of an experiment and a bit of a play and see if we can get it working. And it does work, but it's very much not production code. And I do not want people going and implementing that scrappy bit of code that I've done saying, I mean, that's how Simon said to do it, because it is very much a little POC, a little prototype. I'll include the links to the samples in the GitHub. And that's all I've used. I've just kind of taken that sample, and jammed them together. So you'll have all of the base code I used. And again, you will need to make sure you've set up your service principal, you've set up your secrets, you've done all that pre-work. And don't forget to associate the library with your cluster. And then you can go from there. So that's all for today. As always, thank you for watching. Thank you for commenting and liking and subscribing. As always, it is always appreciated. Let us know what other bits you want us to look into. There's some things that we're going to be talking about probably over the next week or two. Obviously, we've now got this whole Synapse ability to hook Purview into Synapse and troll things. We've got the ability to hook Purview into Power BI and troll all of that kind of stuff. Loads and loads to dig into on that side. And also, we need to talk about cost. Purview is looking fairly pricey. So we'll do probably the next video next week. Probably going to be about the cost of Purview, how you actually manage that cost, and kind of what we're expecting and kind of where we see things fitting given the costs associated. And it's looking fairly pricey. So we'll talk about that next week. Otherwise, you guys have a good time and we'll see you soon. Cheers.